We changed the name into Maastricht University after the treaty, because the treaty of course led to a tremendous importance of the city of Maastricht. The name Maastricht became determining in terms of attracting also international students, so it has had a major influence in terms of attractiveness to foreign students, but also in terms of the content of course, because what we witness today is also the fact that we in European law, for instance, are one of the main universities on the continent. So I think that discussion is over and gone with. We will stay with the euro. We might have further in-depth integration with respect to some aspects of monetary union, which were not signed, which were not prepared in Maastricht, and which of course were major loopholes. Think of, for instance, the issue about the banking union. Think of the issues to what extent we further harmonize fiscal policies in different member states. So there were lots of issues which were not fully clarified at the moment of the Maastricht Treaty, and where we have learned over the last 10 years that we should have had those rules and regulations in place.
Details have changed. The general rhythm hasn't changed very much at all. Both those prime ministers are subject to hostile reactions from their backbenchers insofar as they might wish to embark on deeper forms of European integration. They may be personally opposed to that, but certainly politically they're in no position to advance European integration aggressively because there simply isn't parliamentary support for that in the United Kingdom. So the rhythm of 20 years ago in Maastricht is the rhythm of right now in the United Kingdom, a deeply sceptical attitude in domestic political circles about the virtues of the European Union generally and specifically the role of the United Kingdom within it. If anything, it's gone the other way. If anything, what's happened in 20 years is that the hostility has become even more deep and even more difficult to manage within the parliamentary process. I would agree with you that a great deal of things in the European Union look a great deal better now than they did 20 years ago. Most of all, if you look across the whole sweep of the European continent, we've got democratic states from the Irish Sea all the way across to the borders of Russia, and we've never had that before in the history of the continent. It's a wonderful success story. You don't hear that success story told in Britain. Our press is not open to these kinds of stories. Our press is Atlanticist and is driven by aggression towards the European Union, and politicians haven't been strong enough to hold back that negative tide. As far as I'm concerned, the United Kingdom is a European state. It's not the biggest European state, it's just one of many European states. The problems that the United Kingdom faces are the problems that the other European states face. We're much more likely to solve these problems if we act in common than if we act unilaterally. If you're going to solve problems in common, you can't act bilaterally or multilaterally. You have to have an institutional setup which is going to advance difficult decisions. European Union's not perfect, but it is that institutional setup. It is the Commission, it is the Council, it is the Parliament, it is the Court. Those are the building blocks of a process for managing interdependence between the states of Europe, of which the UK is just one. So as far as I'm concerned, the European Union is the place for the UK to solve its problems in common. But I'm a minority voice, I'm afraid, in British public life. Cameron's serious about holding a referendum on withdrawal from the European Union. Yes and no. He's serious about saying that he wishes to hold such a referendum in the sense that he thinks that will give him political advantage in votes at the next general election. I think he would prefer not to hold a referendum on the European Union if he possibly could, because it's quite clear that business interests, which drive the Conservative Party, are not interested in withdrawal from the European Union. Cameron is doing it because of popular pressure to hold a referendum rather than any clear-sighted view that that would be in the British interest. So it's a short-term tactic. All Cameron wants to do is to win the general election in 2015, and then he'll look again. If he has to hold a referendum as a result of promises he's made, then he will hold a referendum. But I think he'll try and avoid that if he can. And if he doesn't win the general election, then there will not be a referendum.
That's quite a statement.
Well, it's difficult to foresee the future, but that seems to me to be the way in which the wind is blowing. If there were a referendum, would Britain vote to withdraw? I don't think so. That's even more difficult to call. Clearly the media, the popular media, is aggressively hostile to the European Union, but if it really came to the point where withdrawal was a serious possibility, I think there would be aggressive voices raised from within the business community, making it clear that this was not in Britain's economic interest. And indeed, there are governments of other states across the world that have made very clear that they see the United Kingdom's future as being sensibly within, not without, the European Union. Australia said that, Japan said that, the United States have said that. And that carries some weight, and I suspect that a British referendum would be fierce, ferocious, unpleasant, poisonous, but I'm not at all convinced that it would result in the United Kingdom withdrawing from the European Union. Well, nobody really cares what professors of European law have to say. All I am is just an ordinary voter. No, I don't think my views really coincide with those of most frontline politicians who have to at least put up some kind of pretense of being critical of the European Union. I'm far from overjoyed with some of the things that the European Union has done. The economic crisis has not been handled perfectly. The attitude towards refugees is extremely alarming and shameful in many respects. But the European Union is the only place we can solve these problems if we're ever going to solve them. So in that regard, I'm positive about the European Union as an institution and as a process. What's the best way for the European Union to get out of the current economic crisis? I don't know. I'm a lawyer. I have a limited perspective on these things. But it does seem to me that the more that is done in common, the more that is faced up to in common, the more likely it is that sensible solutions will be discovered. Acting unilaterally, bilaterally, is not going to solve problems which clearly face the member states in common. In fact, face the whole global economic system in common. It's about attitude, but it's also about institutions within which we can actually solve these problems, and about politicians giving leadership. And it's about having smart ideas where economists haven't perhaps had the best track record over the last 5 years or so. So we look to them to do a superior job now. I think given how much has been invested in creating the euro, it would be difficult to envisage a situation in which we simply went backwards. Not because there's anything wrong with going backwards if you've made a mistake. In fact, it's a very brave thing to do, to go backwards if you've made a mistake. But the euro, for all its problems, may be the best of all possible alternatives in circumstances where all the alternatives have huge negatives. And abandoning the euro doesn't mean the economic problems are going to go away, rather the reverse, I think.
It's part of a whole integration process, but indeed it's good that one takes some time to look back what happened there in Maastricht those days. And it was indeed very special, because I have to remind you that that was done shortly after the end of the divided Germany, the end of the Soviet system. So it was a different Europe. So only in that point, it's good that we take a few minutes to think back. What was Maastricht? Now, of course, this was about a single currency. But it was the single currency in the context is what do we like to do with Europe? So there came many more member states later. But Maastricht is still the point where so many countries, not all, because a few said we want to go out, we want to stay out, made that choice for a single currency. It was not immediately, because Maastricht, the word euro, didn't exist. It was single currency. Only a few years later, we came to the name euro. So this is my recollection of Maastricht. Partly problems, because we went for an euro, then we got an euro crisis, because there was a lack of governance. If you go for such a single currency, in a country it's the same. You need legislation. You have a central bank. What has the central bank to do? What is the relation with the government? There we are still in the process. Many steps are made. This month, I might say, we have the banking union. This is the conclusion. Did you have a single currency? You need a mechanism to check if the banks in your region, the euro region, are in good shape. So this is an example. So that is what we have achieved. Maybe the most important point is that we have come to the conclusion. It's impossible to have only a single currency, an euro, if there is not a good system of governance. So we are still doing that. Now we see that Angela Merkel will be the new Bundeskanzler in Germany. And she is having discussions now with the SPD, so that there will be what we call a large coalition. We see Mario Draghi, the president of the central bank, who was, by the way, in a former position, the president of the Stability Board. It was worldwide, about stability in the monetary and economic system. So this is a good moment, I think, that had a good opportunity the coming year or 9 months to make Maastricht more definite result. Therefore you need that governance. This is all described in the plan Van Rompuy. Van Rompuy is still, I think, about 8-9 months in office. So I predict here that this event, plus 9 months, will lead to a situation of the finishing, making complete the Maastricht Treaty. Finishing is that there is still a lack of governance. So we have to know what they can do. Some people say, I'll give you a specific example, issuing bonds should not be done by the European Central Bank because these people say this is only a possibility for countries in the south of Europe to get more money out of Europe. Others say, no, this is part of a matured central bank to do that. So that you ask me for an example, what is that? Making it complete. To come to conclusions, stop this ongoing discussion. Yes or no bonds. For me the answer is yes, but under strict conditions that the euro will be robust. It's difficult because this is in the Netherlands, I'm Dutch, you have it, but it's in many countries. There's a feeling that there is too much Europe. Now for that I have a sort of difficult name, that is subsidiarity. I'm convinced, and when I lived my life, and I was in business, and then I was in politics, and then I came to the conclusion that the society is better off with a government who keeps itself limited. The more people can do on the ground level, in their cities, in their businesses, and so on, the better is a society. And then came a wave that it's good to have strong governments who make regulations for everything. And therefore, and that is seen by many people, that Europe is the center for a wrong type of government, that they try to control everything. So I think that is a good reason for Europe to be more modest, having strong governance on the monetary things, but not have regulations on everything, only when they are needed. That is the principle of subsidiarity. As Europeans, we must say, maybe we have some problems, but you cannot make it better to declare yourself anti-European. It's the contrary. Europe has learned to live together. The European Union is created to avoid another world war, starting here. So there is a big tradition and good possibilities to make the European project not a project only for the economy, but also the project for peace, justice, no violence. The key aspect, of course, is to make a next step. We started to make Europe a guarantee, not another war here. It was the coal and steel community. The second big step was that we said we go for a Europe which is, in terms of market, very effective and efficient. We did that in the 70s of last century, basically. So we became powerful in economic terms. Then came Maastricht. Maastricht added this single currency. It was, of course, money, but it was also the explicit declaration to the world. We, Europeans, are united. We will be more united. So that is the process of, and we are going further. But when you go to Maastricht, you have to see this as a step in the process. The federal was the old word that you could have states, but also regions, countries, let's say, who decided not to become one state, and they said, let's go federal. So there's nothing wrong with that word, but that it is not in the treaty is that because the people there together found that word not really fit for Europe. We want, and still the same. So we want to do it our way. And I said a few words to that.
It is the single currency, the introduction of a single currency in Europe.
And does it work?
Yes, it does, although you wouldn't say it if you look at the situation now. And as I said in my presentation, the single currency was supposed to unite us, but it seems to divide us sometimes between the haves and the have-nots, between North and South, between Germany and the rest. But I do think that we are in the process of restoring all the failures that I discern, with the benefit of hindsight, in what we have established in Maastricht, the failures in the establishment of the single currency. We are building a more robust structure now, and I think that the euro will continue to be the single currency. What did we achieve in the last 20 years? Well, first of all, the whole process of changing the European structure or construction has gone on with subsequent treaty changes, but that's more the legalistic point of view. From a practical point of view, we have indeed introduced a single currency, introduced it in more member states than originally. We have 18 now, as from the 1st of January next year. We have also witnessed a major crisis that we didn't foresee back in Maastricht or even 5 years ago, a crisis that has shaken confidence, both in Europe, in the banking system, in the single currency. I do think that we are now in the process of restoring the fault lines of Maastricht, if I may say it that way, the fault lines of what we constructed then, what we built at that time, and that we're in a better building afterwards. Our construction is more robust than it used to be. Okay, we have been in an economic crisis which started in the banking sector since 2008. And 2 years later, there was also a crisis erupting about the debt levels, the levels of indebtedness of Greece and other member states, which led to huge speculation on the euro going down, the euro leaving the stage, so to say. And that crisis is being solved by all kinds of measures that involve hardship for people, hardship for unemployed people and for pensioners and others who feel the pain of all the measures that governments need to adopt. Answering your question, this is a financial crisis which became an economic one and then became even a kind of identity crisis for Europe. But I think we are tackling them at the various instances, both the economic and the financial and the European construction aspect of it. I don't think there is sufficient trust amongst the citizens. No, we should be realistic. There is not. What I fear is that we are dominated to a certain extent by our very short-term vision of things and by the way the media and the markets dominate our perception of matters. And it might be time to reinvent ourselves as citizens and to reclaim ground and say, no, what we want is a certain future for ourselves instead of parroting each other about the euro is going to finish or a doom is going to be our future. I may be a specialist in the area of EMU, but I don't think that that gives me the right to say what people should think or what other citizens should think. And I consider it important that specialists also take into account what I would call the plight of the people who are suffering from the current measures. I think first of all is that the euro is here to stay because it's part of a political project. We want to live in peace and prosperity and freedom in Europe, and the euro is part of that. That's one. Two, there are a lot of measures that have been undertaken already that strengthen the structure for the euro, that strengthen the economic underpinnings. A lot of the economic measures that we've taken have already started to bear fruit nowadays. So I think there's hope glimmering at the horizon. And perhaps, but that's more of a philosophical remark almost, if we talk ourselves into the crisis will be prolonged. If we instead look at the crisis as a challenge and we say we'll get out of this, and stronger than we went into it, the crisis may be shortened.
I think overall it was a qualified success, although experience has shown that the treaty had its weaknesses, which then had to be addressed, notably when the economic and financial crisis started in 2008. So it was a step forward, but there were some construction problems. It's like a house. It's okay as long as there's an earthquake or a big tempest, and then you realize that part of the building was built too rapidly or not with the right technology. Well, then the thing had to be fixed. But of course, fixing things under the tempest or during the earthquake is much more difficult than doing it from the beginning. People are discussing what's the right solution. At the end of the day, the European Union will survive, but it has been damaged. And the result of this is that we've probably lost, let's say, 10, 15 years in the speed of European integration. The problem being that while this was happening, the rest of the world hasn't slowed down. So the rest of the world is changing extremely rapidly, and the risk for the European Union is to be too slow. Still have to solve a number of problems, the banking union, the fiscal union, but the roadmap is reasonably clear. I mean, the to-do list is reasonably clear. The big problem is not in the technique of European integration. The big problem now is the relationship to citizens. The big problem is low support for European integration in public opinion, which of course contributes to slowing the integration process for the moment. Yes, I'm faithful because I've always thought that what is necessary happens at the end of the day, the risk being that it happens too late for Europe to remain relevant on this planet, which again is changing formidably rapidly with other civilizations like Asia, like the US, becoming quite dynamic. And the risk is that, again, Europe lags, slows down, and that's not what I hope for my grandchildren. Of course, the European Commission
at that moment
always has to say that it's pleased with what members have decided at the end of the day. But I remember, because I was Chief of Staff of Delors at the time, that he had said, and he knew, that as compared to what the Commission had proposed in terms of economic and social integration to match the currency monetary integration, the member states did only part of the job. There was a full-fledged monetary integration. There was a half-baked economic and social integration. And this discrepancy appeared in full light at the time of the crisis, which is why it has to be fixed now. Actually, politically, the Commission has to be pleased, but the proposals of the Commission had only partly been accepted by members, but we all know at the end of the day, members decide. Trade-wise, the European Union remains an elephant in world trade. The EU trade policy is decided and cooked at federal level, so it remains a heavyweight in trade, and that hasn't changed. The problem being that in other areas, like development, like environment, like foreign policy, the level of European integration remains far from what it is in trade, and this imbalance is a problem. The US or China have a more coherent approach between trade issues, security issues, geopolitical issues, and the fight against climate change, which of course remains a big problem of economic integration. But I've always thought it would take much longer to converge on issues that have to do with foreign and security policy, which is a mix of interests and values. And the reality is that although there are common European values, they are not at this stage as coherent, as convergent, as solidly similar as they would be in the US or in China. So it will take more time. The river of foreign and common security policy is much longer than the river of economic integration. Doing slowly, but again, I think that was to be expected. It takes time. I think it will keep integrating because it needs to keep integrating in order to remain relevant 20, 30, 50 years from now. Again, the problem is a problem of speed. If we don't do it quick enough, then Europe will lose its relevance. And as a European, I want the European civilization to remain an option on this planet.
I think on the one hand it has been an important treaty amendment, particularly because it laid the foundations for monetary union, not so much the economic and monetary, but the monetary union. On the other hand, it is a moment of an evolution of a work in progress. So the result is certainly not perfect. If you look to the structure conceived in Maastricht, it is extremely complex with the European Union, overarching 3 European communities, international organizations in their own right. It is very untransparent and difficult to explain. But that has now been improved by the Lisbon Treaty. So just to say that this is work in progress and we are still trying to make something of it. The jurisdiction of the court has been increased with regard to what was the third pillar of the Maastricht Treaty, justice and home affairs, which has now been replaced, again work in progress, by full jurisdiction in those sectors. And there is perhaps also another element which has been important for the court, that after Maastricht, the criticism of highest courts in the member states, like the Bundesverfassungsgericht, difficulty of those jurisdictions to accept the primacy of union law over national law has increased and has triggered, I think, a very interesting process of judicial dialogue between the highest courts in the member states and the Luxembourg Court, the European Court, to try to accommodate to each other constitutional constraints and difficulties in order to avoid conflicts between European law and national constitutional law. And that until now has been rather successfully done. There has only been one Supreme Court, the Czech Constitutional Court, which has refused to accept the primacy in a specific case, but that has really, fortunately, remained a huge exception. It is an obvious problem. Next year we will have the elections for the European Parliament, and the expectations about the percentage of voters which will be willing and prepared to vote are not very positive. This is an old problem, but it has only been increasing. I think one of the obvious answers would be that national politicians start to explain to their electorate the importance and the positive consequences of European integration. And I think that has been lacking far too much in the past. I understand that it is not so interesting for a national politician who is interested in his authority on the national level, in his relationship with the voters, to explain the importance of Brussels, but I think that should be done. And it's the more obvious because the national parliaments in the union structure has seen their influence increased. Also in the national parliaments, Europe should be object of a debate, also explaining to the electorate what is this about. There is still a huge misunderstanding about what is the Commission doing, what is the Council doing. I understand that, but well, the only answer is explaining on the national political level, and perhaps also as in school, in secondary school, it is explained how the national politics function, how the national structure, constitutional structure functions, what the role of the government and the parliament. Well, there should be, in addition to that, as far as Europe is concerned. Europe has become so important also for us in daily life that it is worthwhile to explain to the pupils in school that that is a fact and how it functions. I think so. If you look to the euro crisis, all the difficulties, political difficulties to find solutions, despite that, solutions have been found. Often the last minute, not sufficient, but nevertheless, we have been able, also the national politicians have been able to muddle through and until now to come up with solutions. So I think what the Germans call the Sachzwang, the necessity to come out of it is so strong that national politics will find the answer as they have been able to do now, until now. So I am rather positive. But it's obvious that this cannot continue. I mean, we'll see at the European elections whether what is said now, that the Front National in France and perhaps also Mr. Wilders in the Netherlands will get very strong support with anti-European programs. We'll see. But if that really amasses momentum, I mean, that cannot continue. So it might be that we are heading to a kind of confrontation which might be solitary in the end.